Hey, everybody. Welcome back to the Build Strong podcast. We are committed to trying to help people to build their lives strong, whether that's in their faith, in their marriage, in their health, in their family. We are committed to that. And when you can expect new episodes, really these roll out the second Tuesday of every month. And as always, if you have questions, make sure that you send us an email at podcast@lifecenter.com. Today, I've been looking forward to this moment because I have my best friend, Josh Jamison, on the podcast with me. Josh, thanks for joining with us.
Oh, thanks, man. I appreciate it.
And we were just reminiscing. We've known each other now 24 years.
Yeah, almost a quarter century.
Yeah, almost a quarter of a century. That's pretty remarkable.
I know.
That was before gray hair for me.
Yep.
You still do not have any gray hair.
Oh, it's there. Trust me.
That's
actually
amazing.
I get it the most right here on the beard.
In the
chin.
beard.
That's why I keep it short. But we need to celebrate our friendiversary.
Friendiversary.
25 years is a big deal.
What should we do for our 25th friendiversary?
Man, Maui sounds pretty good.
Maui? I'm sure Amber and Carrie will be fine with that. Hey, ladies, we're heading out for what? 25-year friendship. You know. We'll see you guys in a week.
You got to celebrate the important things in life.
Yeah. But today we are talking about developing healthy habits.
Yeah.
And, this is an area that I think all of us can grow in. I think most people that I interact with, they know the need to develop them.
Sure.
But I kind of want to have a conversation with you because here's what I know about you. Almost every single day, I will get a notification on my watch. And it will say, Josh Jamison just completed, a triathlon or whatever. It's like every single day you are in the gym, and that's whether you're in town or out of town. But it's not just in your physical fitness. You have habits as a pastor, as a leader, as a husband, as a dad. And I think this conversation is so important because I've met so many people, they have high expectations in their lives.
Yeah.
But I think so often what we're missing is the habits that probably help us get there.
Right.
And so we're going to talk about that a little bit today. And even as we begin, let's be honest, everybody has habits.
Yeah, absolutely.
Everybody. Doesn't matter, those who are listening or watching today, they have some level of habits. And I thought we would just begin by having a little bit of fun. All-time worst habits that you've seen in people, either others or yourself, that drive you crazy. All-time worst habits.
Oh, man. I know for me, one I had for a long time was biting my nails. Really bad.
Okay.
And all it took was a really cute girl in band class to go, oh my gosh, you bite your nails? And literally from that moment on, done. Never did it again. But
okay, now this is interesting. Band.
Yes.
Okay, what did you play?
Trumpet. Yeah.
Interesting. You're a drummer, but you played the trumpet.
So I didn't want to play trumpet. My mom was like, you're going to do band. And I was like, okay, great. I want to play saxophone. She goes, no, you don't.
No.
I was like, why? She goes, saxophone gets the lamest parts. Trumpet gets to play all the melodies. So you're going to play trumpet. And I was terrible at it. Part of the reason I was terrible at it is I never actually practiced. Ooh. I had a tape recorder, and I would go into my room during my practice time, and I would record myself practicing for about 5 minutes and then just sit there and put it on repeat as loud as I possibly could.
I love it.
To make it sound like I was practicing. But I decided to quit because I hated it so much. Yeah. And my mom said, you can only quit trumpet if you pick up another instrument. And so out of the blue, I just said, I'll play the drums.
That's crazy.
And had no idea if I would like it or if I'd be good at it, but served me well since then. So.
Ladies and gentlemen, 24 years of friendship, and I never knew that you played the trumpet.
Yeah.
Do we have a trumpet around here? Can we get a trumpet and see if Josh
or
can still play?
Or shofar. Could blow a shofar for you.
Okay. My, I think, all-time worst habit, similar, but mine was sucking my thumb.
Oh my gosh.
And so when I finally turned 18,
I was
I'm just
say,
joking.
You broke that at 24, 25.
Yeah. But when I was little, my parents were like, you've got to stop sucking your thumb. You got to stop sucking your thumb. And I'm like, I would, but I would fall asleep and I'm like, I'm not going to do it. I would like fall asleep on my hands. And then when I would wake up, my thumb would be in my mouth.
Did it impact your teeth at all? Because that's the big thing they always talk about.
Yeah, it probably did. That's why I got braces early on. It was like 3. But so one night, my parents sneak into my room and they paint my thumb green. Because my mom kept warning me. She's like, if you keep sucking your thumb's going to fall off.
Marsha is a legend.
And I'm like, what? My eyes are like all big. I wake up and my mom, comes walking in. She's like, how you doing? I'm like, my thumb's green. And she goes, I told you to stop sucking it. And I go, but the problem is I suck this one, not this one. And she realized she painted the wrong thumb. And so, Mom and Dad, if you're listening, I love you. Thank you.
So great.
But habits are interesting because we all have them.
Yeah.
We all live with them. We all experience the impact of them. But in your life, what have you found that actually helps you develop healthy habits?
Yeah. Well, first of all, to the point you're making, it's important to note, like I think Duke University did a study and they came out and said that 40% of your daily decisions fall in the category of habitual decisions.
40%.
So when you say we all have habits, we all have a lot of habits. And really those fall into the things that you do without even thinking about it, but you do it routinely, right?
Yeah.
So we all have a lot of habits. And for me, I already referenced one of the ways that I got rid of a bad habit, which was, the negative side of having someone that you care about or someone whose opinion means a lot to you, give you some negative feedback on something they see in you. But for me, positively, the thing that's helped me a lot, because I haven't always been a disciplined, routine person. In fact, I don't know why Carrie married me, because during that season of my life as a young man, I was very undisciplined, very, like I remember one time she was over at my family's house and we were doing like a family dinner or whatever. And to get up to our like entertainment room, you had to walk by my bedroom, and I had left the door open on my bedroom. And she walked by and saw what a disheveled mess it was. And I was so embarrassed, but I don't know how I convinced her to marry me. I was in such a state of disarray in that season of my life. But what helped me was not the process of developing a desire for new habits, but creating a destination or having a picture in my mind of the kind of person I knew that I needed to become. Because once I developed a destination, I could reverse engineer the kind of habits that sort of person would have.
That's so
and
good.
So I think the biggest thing for me was having a vision for who I wanted to become, the kind of leader that I knew I needed to be, the kind of husband I knew I needed to be. And eventually, once I started having kids, the kind of dad that I wanted to be. And seeing where I was currently and where I knew I wanted to go, it helped me then reverse engineer, okay, so what things need to change in my life?
Yeah.
And once I could identify those things, it honestly became very simple. Developing new habits is not a complex thing, but it can be a difficult thing. And those are different.
That's a good word.
Yeah.
You talked about that stat. You said it was from Duke.
Yep, Duke University.
And, instantly what popped into my mind, our middle son just got his permit.
Big deal.
And so now we have 2 teenage drivers in our house. But it was this reminder, even the process of like getting in a car and starting it felt so foreign to him. And that journey of like, no, you have to hit that button. You have to use the key this way. You have to do this journey. And now think about how many of us, like, we don't even think about putting the car in reverse. It's just second nature. It's like you said, it's habitual. And so thinking and linking that idea to not just what are the habits that I want to create, but I love what you said. What is the type of person that I want to become? I think it was Pastor Chris Hodges who coined this phrase, and I love it. Yeah, brilliant. He talks about how so many people, they live with uphill hopes, but have downhill habits.
Oof, yeah.
And I remember the first time I heard that, and I'm like, okay, hold on. Because how many times have I sat and looked at some area of my life, whether it's my health, my finances, my relationships, even my study, what are the areas that I want to progress in? And I think it's so easy to have aspirational hopes, but we lack any type of like concrete habit in order for those things to become realized.
Yeah, it's so true.
Yeah,
absolutely.
in your life, any scriptures, any themes, any passages that kind of come to your mind as you think about this dynamic of habits? I know for me, and a lot of people, that word discipline isn't necessarily like a fun word.
Yeah, sure.
Many of us, we want to avoid it at all costs. But the older that I get, I realize like there's certain things that I just have to create disciplines.
Right.
And often we want desire to show up before the discipline, but I've found in my life, often the desire shows up
follows
after the discipline.
Yeah, absolutely.
I learned that when I started running years ago. I've learned that as I've, kind of got into CrossFit a little bit, because there's a lot of mornings where I don't feel like it, but I have to discipline myself.
Yep.
But then you begin to desire the very things that did not seem fun.
Yeah.
Any thoughts, any scriptures, any passages that
Yeah,
that
there's
stick out
actually,
to
the
you?
scripture talks a lot about when it comes to, getting up early in the morning, taking time to meditate, the things that you regularly remind yourself of, write it above the door, write it on your wrist, whatever you need to do. But kind of an obscure one that's always been encouraging to me is actually out of the story of Daniel.
Yeah.
Obviously we know, Daniel was above reproof, that they were looking for a way to discredit Daniel, which is when they went to the king. They got him to write this law, anyone who worships or prays to anyone other than me, they're going in the lion's den. And the scripture says that when Daniel found out about that he went back to his room and opened up the windows and began to pray just as he had always done.
Yeah.
Right? Like there's this reference to this regular rhythm and pattern in Daniel's life that pre-existed before the pressure. And I think this is an important lesson that I've had to learn, is you have to develop the habit before you need the habit.
Oh, that's good.
Like too often we wait until there's a crisis to go, okay, now I need to start doing whatever, fill in the blank.
Yeah.
You have a heart attack. Okay, now I need to start taking care of my health.
Yeah.
You have an issue in your marriage. Oh, I guess I better need to start paying attention to my spouse. And it's reactionary instead of being,
Purposeful.
purposeful.
Yeah,
Exactly.
yeah.
And I think that you look at a story like that and you go, what would have happened in Daniel's life if he didn't already have this rhythm of going to the Lord, talking with the Lord, this habit in his life of regularly praying? And I think that I look at stuff like that and go, okay, I don't want to wait until there's a crisis. I don't
Right.
want to wait until there's a problem. I can't wait until the heat is being turned up. I got to have this stuff in place so that when those moments happen, I'm ready for them.
Yeah.
So that's a place in Scripture that's been challenging and encouraging.
Yeah.
Kind of I think a pattern and a model to follow.
Yeah.
For sure.
Yeah. I think about the scripture that talks about how no discipline in the moment feels pleasant, but later those who are trained by it,
Yep.
it produces
That's
life.
That's it.
And I think that's the grind, right? That's a word that you hear a lot right now. Like, you got to be willing to grind. You got to be willing to grind. But it's amazing how often you use the word crisis.
Yeah.
It's amazing. I think we see this a lot as pastors.
Mm-hmm.
You're a pastor at Eastridge up
Yeah.
in Issaquah. I'm here at Life Center in Tacoma. And it's amazing how when the crisis hits, now all of a sudden it's like a catalytic moment,
Yeah.
which can work for the good.
Sure.
But what would that crisis have looked like if the preparation on the front end?
Absolutely.
I wonder how many crises we avoid if the discipline would have been there versus the crisis kind of causing
Yeah.
the discipline.
Absolutely.
And so I think that's a journey for all of us to be aware of. Here's what I know: the habits that we make in life, they're either moving us toward or away from who we are called to be.
Yeah.
So if that stat is true, 40% are just kind of on autopilot.
Yep.
There's other dynamics in our lives, but the habits that we have, the things that I live with day in and day out, is it actually moving me toward my destiny, toward my calling, toward, you used the word vision earlier, the idea of who I want to be, the husband I want to be, the health that I want to have in my physical body, the health that I want to have in my finances. Are my habits moving me toward that or away from that? And what this means at some level, if I'm going to build healthy habits, I have to be willing to do some inspection
Absolutely.
in my life. I have to do some reflection. And so in your life, do you have like a rhythm where you reflect or you go over your values or you think through your habits? What does that look like for you?
Yeah, right now it looks like an annual evaluation. Like I kind of will do check-ins quarterly, and really it comes down to conversations with my wife. Like she's honestly the best place of feedback because she knows me better than anybody and she's honest. I think we give ourselves a little bit of benefit of the doubt. We give ourselves credit for intention, where people who are honest give us, the feedback for what we're actually doing.
Yeah.
So we have regular conversations about everything from how am I doing spiritually, how am I doing emotionally, how am I doing physically, how am I doing mentally, and then how are we doing financially, in all these areas. I think it was Peter Drucker who said you can't manage what you don't measure.
Yeah, that's right.
And I think that when it comes to even our habits and our personal lives, we have to have the regular rhythm of inventory. I think that being willing to take regular inventory of how you're doing, where you're at, and being brutally honest about those things is super important for you to then be able to go, okay, what needs to change?
Yeah.
And how do I need to go about changing it? I think that those things have been super helpful. So there are some things that are easier to measure than others. Like measuring your bank account's pretty easy, It is what it is. Like your health for a lot of different reasons is pretty easy to measure.
Yeah.
I think it becomes a little more difficult when you get into how am I doing mentally and emotionally and how am I doing spiritually.
Yeah.
And so figuring out how you measure those things. So I think sometimes with that, you have a list of questions you need to answer. How am I feeling regularly? Am I feeling anxious? Do I find myself gravitating towards worry? What are the things that I'm dwelling on?
Yeah.
I think that thanks to technology, you could actually go and check where am I spending time? What am I listening to? What am I watching?
Right.
Technology will tell you.
Thanks
just
screen
open,
time.
Just open up screen time. It'll let you know.
Yeah.
I think that you could probably even go to your algorithm and just take a look at what's populating because it's probably a good indicator of the things that you find yourself gravitating towards.
Yeah,
so I think on those things you have to be a little more creative. I think it needs to be a little more question based, whereas some things maybe like your health or your finances, they're numbers.
Yeah.
They can be a little more cut and dried.
Yeah. You mentioned a number of things there. So let's lean on that.
Yeah.
No matter how old somebody is, no matter what stage of life they're in, what are some habits that you think should be non-negotiables for people? And maybe not just specific habits, maybe that, but maybe kind of broader buckets that, hey, you should really pay attention to these things.
Yeah, for sure. Well, I think not to hyper spiritualize it, but the first thing on that list has got to be, the rhythm and habit of your relationship with Jesus.
Yeah.
And I think that requires not just like checking off a Bible reading list.
Yeah. Went to church last Sunday.
Yeah, went to church last Sunday.
From my couch.
I hit 3 out of 7 days on my YouVersion Bible reading plan, killing it.
Yeah.
But I think that every relationship requires intention and time. And that requires
good.
Quality of time and quantity of time, and those things are different. You can spend a lot of quantity without quality and you're not getting anywhere, And so, the goal of reading your Bible is not to get from the beginning of one chapter to the end of the next chapter, but it's to grow closer to Jesus.
That's good.
And that could be one verse.
Yeah.
But the question is are you spending time listening to the voice of God in your life?
Yeah.
For me, and we're all different, we're all wired different. So I think part of this is to even discover how God has wired you. Because for me, being a verbal processor and being a people person, the easier things for me are I connect with God easily via worship. Mm-hmm. I connect easily with God via Christian community. I struggle to connect with God in times of prayer or personal meditation, being alone, because I don't like being alone. But I've found that those are actually the places of greatest depth and intimacy in my walk with the Lord. And I think there's part of that because you're pushing beyond, it's a sacrifice. It literally is a sacrifice of praise to the Lord when you push beyond comfort to get to know Him more. And He rewards you in those things.
Yeah.
So discovering how you're wired and not using it, this is personal pet peeve. I hope this doesn't offend anybody. I'm not anti-Enneagram or anti-whatever. I get really frustrated when people use that for their excuse of why they are a certain way.
Oh, I'm an
Yeah.
8, so that's why I'm a jerk.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
It's like that's not your excuse. It's not your excuse to be a jerk. It's also not your excuse for why you don't engage in certain parts of your relationship with the Lord.
Yeah, that's
you
good.
know. And so I think that's got to be primary. You need to have personal time of being in God's Word, time in prayer, time alone with the Lord, and then being a part of Christian community.
And what's interesting on that note, I think we have to remember Jesus is expecting some level of fruit. Mm-hmm. So again, going back to that, how we often measure ourselves by intent. Well, I wanted,
Right.
So we measure ourselves by that, but he wants production at some level. We have to be okay with that. Now, that doesn't mean we're saved by our works. That doesn't mean like it's about do more, try harder, strive.
Right.
You gotta pull yourself up by your bootstraps. But healthy things are designed to produce fruit. It's one of the metaphors that Jesus went to time and time and time
regularly.
again. And so I think that's a great reminder for those of us who are Jesus followers. Like, there should be some fruit. What are the habits that are actually cultivating the fruit? Not just that I want to see, because I think this is the danger. I want to be more consistent in church attendance this year. Great goal.
Yeah.
Great habit. But what are the fruit, the characteristics that are actually growing out of our lives? Do they look like Christ? Are they attractive to those who don't know Christ? And they're like, man, how do you have that level of peace when it feels like life is falling apart?
Yeah.
And so those are the habits that we need to develop that are actually going to lead to the fruit that he desires.
Well, and this may be pushing the conversation a little bit one direction, but
go ahead, brother.
I think that one of the biggest issues that I see in Western church culture, is we want our relationship with God on our terms. We want to approach God on our terms. It doesn't work that way. God's the one who gets to set the terms.
Yeah.
So when it comes to how we engage in relationship with Him, I don't get to pick how that works. He tells me how it works.
Yeah.
When it comes to how I'm going to worship God, I don't get to pick how I worship God. He determines how I get to worship God.
Yeah.
And so, even when it comes to church, when it comes to scripture, when it comes to these other spiritual disciplines in your life, like, we don't get to set our own expectations, or we don't get to set our own rhythm for what this should be. God's the one who says, this is how you're going to worship me. This is how you engage in relationship with me.
Yeah.
These are the mechanisms I've created for you to participate in, and get busy doing it,
Yeah.
And it's not that He's trying to be controlling. He's actually creating these boundaries for us that we get to live within the blessing of God. Like, this is where the blessing of God
this is where the game
lives.
is meant to be
Yes,
played.
exactly.
Yeah.
And we
That's
see
good.
it so backwards. We're like, well, but like, I want to do it like this, or like, it'd be so much more fun. And God's going, actually, it would destroy you if you tried to do it that way. Trust me when I tell you, like, this is how it's supposed to work.
Yeah.
And I think that when we begin to approach God the way He's designed for us to approach Him, when we worship Him the way He's called us to worship Him, all of a sudden you get to experience the fullness of who God is, His blessing in your life, and you get to the full free life that God has designed for you, And I think that there's so much blessing on the other side of obedience,
Yeah.
on the other side of discipline.
Yeah. You used a word there, spiritual disciplines.
Yeah.
It's becoming more familiar in our culture in this time, but for a lot of years, kind of lost, kind of gone, and it sounds like, man, that sounds like punishment. Like, why would you do that? Years ago, came across such a great analogy or metaphor, and it goes back again to this idea of what's the type of life that I want? What's the type of fruit that God wants to grow out of my life?
Yeah.
That's where spiritual disciplines come into play. They become these healthy habits that cultivate. So just like if I told you right now, Josh, go find a piano, sit down and play Beethoven's Fifth or whatever. I don't think you can do that.
No.
Okay. Carrie probably can.
I've heard that we're all like a couple YouTube videos away from being able to do anything. So,
So I mean,
maybe.
like the challenge is, in order to actually sit down and play that, you got to put in the work.
Yeah.
Just like anybody who wants to go run a half marathon, like, you're going to have to go on some training runs. You're going to have to put in the work. But there's this idea, for some reason, I prayed the prayer. I said yes to Jesus.
Yeah.
It should be good, right?
Right.
And yet the reality is, in order for us to look more and more like Christ, there's certain habits or certain disciplines that we got to lean into. Okay, so we talked about relationship with Jesus, other disciplines or habits that you're like, okay, these should be non-negotiables no matter what age, what stage of life.
Well, I think that I'm big on the health side of things
Yeah.
when it comes to like your physical health.
Yeah.
I make some observations. The people who keep moving are the people who keep moving. You know what I mean? Like, I think that people who stay active, you know, like they live longer lives. And that's not, just a total perfect rule of thumb.
Right.
But in general, I think that people who are intentional about continuing to stay active. And I just believe that as long as there's breath in your lungs, that God has design and purpose for your time here on earth. And I don't want to let something that I have control over hinder me from being able to be effective at what God has asked me to do. So part for me when it comes to like my physical health is I'm trying to stick around for my wife as long as I possibly can, to stick around for the call of God that's on my life as long as I possibly can, and stay physically fit enough to like compete with my kids as long as I possibly can.
Come on,
you know what I mean?
come on.
So like that's a big driver motivator for me.
I love that. On the physical fitness thing.
Yeah.
One of our CrossFit coaches said this like months ago, and it struck me. He goes, the reason why we do burpees now is so that when we fall, when we're 70, we can get back up instead of like that commercial. I've fallen and I can't get up.
You need life alert.
Yeah, exactly. And so I was like, dude, that actually makes a lot of sense. So, okay.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So obviously the physical, the spiritual, I think right now this has become a bigger deal than probably ever, which is taking the time to have inventory about how you're doing mentally and emotionally.
Yeah.
We're
So
living
important.
in the middle of a massive mental health crisis.
Right.
And I think a lot of it is people are experiencing emotions and they're experiencing stress that they do not have the tools built into their life to know how to cope with them with health. And so I think for the average person, like being able to have some structure and some tools at your fingertips to be able to measure and then to be able to get the kind of help, and that may even just be developing some patterns of getting your heart and mind back on track. Doesn't necessarily mean like I gotta go to a counselor or, I need help right now, but like I have some rhythms built into my life to keep myself on a healthy track. I think that right now we need a better theology of technology. Like I think we need a better understanding, because I'm not anti-technology, but I do think that we need to have an awareness of how technology is going to continually become more intertwined into our lives,
and how it's shaping,
us, and it's not going backwards. It's only going to continue to progress.
Right.
But we are spiritual beings first, physical beings second, and we have this external force that's becoming more intertwined into our lives that we need to set the boundaries for how we're going to play with it. And so if we don't set the boundaries for it, it's going to take as much ground as we'll give it.
A theology of technology.
Ooh.
Okay, that's going to be our next discussion on this podcast when we have you back. There you go.
It takes me back to Napoleon Dynamite, I love technology.
Oh, sing it. Yes.
I'm not going to. Yeah, it's as much as you get.
I love it. So we've talked about developing healthy habits. Let's deal with the other side of the coin, because sometimes the greatest breakthrough is not just about developing something new.
Right.
For some listening, it's like, okay, that's great, developing. How do I break the unhealthy ones?
Right.
So any thoughts on breaking unhealthy habits besides painting your thumbs of your kids green?
Thumbs, for sure.
Number
one, having accountability and asking for help. This is something that forever I struggled with until I came to a crisis. So a number of years ago, I realized that on our youth team, like we had come to a head where I felt like we were dealing with some toxic culture. And the way I knew, you can feel some things. You can't always put your finger on it, but you feel it.
Yeah.
But I got to a point where I was having meetings almost every single week with individuals on our team, and every single meeting they were complaining about each other. And I was like, we have some toxic dynamics that we need to deal with. And so we had a meeting, and in that meeting I said, okay, we're going to write down on this whiteboard everything that we love about working on this team together. And so they raise their hand, we write it down. And then I handed out 3x5 cards to everyone. I said, now you can anonymously write down what you hate about this team. And so they wrote it down. We handed them all in, mixed them up, and we wrote it down on the whiteboard. And it was painful, like the things that people would honestly say about like what was going on our team. And I said, do any of you feel like the things that are on this board are inaccurate or unfair? And no one disagreed with anything.
Wow.
And I said, okay. And this is so stupid, but I had a box. And on the box, I'd written in Sharpie, things that need to die. And I literally just took all the cards and I dropped it in the box. And I was like, we're making a commitment today that all the things that we've written down here, these things need to go.
Did you light it on fire?
No, I didn't. That would have been 1992.
That would have been like
that would
1990
have been,
youth group,
exactly,
right? Like,
exactly.
burn all the secular music.
Exactly.
Okay.
Bring your CDs to the altar. So here's what I told them. I said, each of you are going to have a one-on-one meeting with me. And in this meeting, I'm going to bring to you 2 to 3 things that I see in you that are positives that you bring to this team that are helping us. But I'm also going to give you 2 to 3 things that I'm seeing in you that need to change.
Yeah.
And I'm asking you to do the same thing for me. I want you to bring 2 to 3 things that in my leadership you see as positive, but I'm asking you to bring 2 to 3 things that you see in me that need to change. I said, so you get 1 meeting, I get 40 meetings.
Yeah.
You know, and so after 40 meetings, I pulled together all the things that our team said, these are positives about Josh's leadership. These are the negatives of Josh's leadership. So at our next meeting, I did a summary for our team. I said, all right, all of you have had a one-on-one with me. All of you know the things I've given you. Here are the things you gave me. Here are the things that you've told me about my leadership that are positive. And here are the things, this is what that means to me. I'm going to commit to this and this and this. And here are the things you've shown me are negative. And this will not shock you one bit, but one of the top things on that list was I was too sarcastic.
Really?
I know. Very sarcastic. And that was something that I took very seriously.
Yeah,
I realized I was, when I would get upset, I would get sarcastic. When I would get stressed, I would get sarcastic. When someone would do something that I felt like was detrimental to the team, my reaction was to belittle them with sarcasm, And so I made a commitment to the team, like these are the 5 things I'm going to work on. Number 1 on that list was sarcasm.
Yeah.
So I knew this was something I was working on, and I had asked the team to hold me accountable to it. And a couple weeks later, we were in a pre-service meeting, and one of our guy leaders walked in with a new bag. And it wasn't a backpack, it was a sling bag, And at the time, if you were a dude rocking a sling bag, it's kind of like, oh, okay, sure, whatever.
Yeah.
And so I made a sarcastic comment about his man purse, when he walked into the meeting. And it got a couple laughs. And the moment it came out of my mouth, I was like, that's it. Like, that's what I need to work on. And I didn't have the courage to deal with it in the moment, but it gnawed at me. And I couldn't get over it. I left a couple days later to go on a ministry trip. I was in Minnesota, and I was in the middle of a meeting, and it was eating at me so bad I couldn't handle it anymore. And so I got up out of the meeting and called this guy leader, and I wept on the phone and just apologized. Like, dude, I'm so sorry. And he wept on the phone. It was we're weeping over a man bag. I was like, dude, what is going on right now? And, but it was the first step towards me breaking this habit in my life of being sarcastic. And in our next pre-service meeting, I owned it in front of the team. I was like, guys, I need to I called this leader and I talked to him about it personally, but I need to own it in front of you guys. Because I've said this is something that I'm wanting to change. And I got to be honest with you, I don't struggle with sarcasm anymore. It's not even really in my vocabulary.
Yeah.
And I don't have to even think about it because there was a season where I was willing to come under accountability.
Yeah.
And to be held in a place of accountability. And I asked for help. And it was that process that helped me get rid of one of the worst habits that I had.
Yeah, that's awesome.
And I got to tell you, It sucked.
Yeah.
It was hard.
Yeah.
It was humbling.
Yeah.
This is the best thing I could have done.
Yeah.
And I think that that's the step for so many of these areas in our life. You name
Right.
it, fill in the blank.
Right.
If you're struggling with a negative habit, a habit that's pulling you in the wrong direction, ask for help, bring yourself under accountability, put in the work. You can do it. You can absolutely do it. I heard a story, crazy story. Did you know that nicotine only stays in your system for 4 days? Like the addiction to nicotine itself only lasts for 4 days. It's not nicotine you get addicted to. It's actually where you consume nicotine, the people you're around when you're taking nicotine. And so if people will stop smoking for 4 days, they can quit their addiction to nicotine, but they get addicted to the social aspect of it.
The other dynamics.
Yeah, the other dynamics of it.
Interesting.
And so you've got to even learn like what are the environments you need to pull yourself out of?
Yeah.
Or maybe what are the people you need to pull yourself away from? You know, like there's other things at play versus just, you know, it being a one spoke wheel.
Yeah. It's so good because all of us, we have a sense of like who we want to be or where we want to be. And hopefully if those listening are like, no, I don't have clarity on that. That's probably step one.
Yeah.
Like what type of person do you want to be? And as followers of Jesus, we believe that, you know, there is a very real eternity. So where do you want your life to lead you towards?
Yes.
And so that sense of destiny, but if you walk it back for a moment, I think here's why habits are so important is because our destiny is connected to the character that we live with. Mm-hmm. So our character is shaping our destiny, but what forms our character is our habits.
Yeah.
And so our habits are actually shaping the character that we live with, which ends up kind of determining the destiny of our lives.
Absolutely.
But even before habits, there's a bunch of little actions, and before actions, it's the thoughts.
Yeah.
And so for some, like the battle is literally just changing how you think about what you think about. That's
Absolutely.
where your whole point on accountability is such a game changer, because the moment you said something, you wouldn't have even caught it before.
No.
But the moment that came out of your mouth, you were like, oh, and you had a new thought, which gave you a chance to begin to take different actions, develop different habits, which was reshaping your character, which was aligning you with the destiny that you
100%.
wanted to have.
Yeah.
Okay, as we close, hurdles.
Yeah.
We could have all these desires, all of these goals, like, okay, this is going to be the year, you know, and you know, we've always seen this, you know, January health clubs are packed out.
Yep.
Resolutions, you know, they last for like 60 seconds. What are the hurdles that we need to be aware of when it comes to our habits and actually like moving from, okay, Josh Tyler, thanks for, you know, the thoughts. What are the hurdles that we need to be aware of so that we can avoid those things?
I think one of the biggest hurdle is having the wrong expectations and the wrong perception of what like changing habits really requires.
Oh, that's good. Yeah.
You know, it's very rarely going from 0 to 100. It's not a switch that you flip. It's a process you walk out, and that means that it's messy. And I think that you need to commit to progress and not perfection. Like you just got to understand there are going to be moments of setbacks, and that doesn't mean that you failed. It doesn't mean that you throw in the towel and you quit. It means you learn from it, you get up, and you keep moving forward, you know? I think that, you know, when it comes to like the health side of things, are there going to be days you miss the gym? Sure. Are there going to be days you don't eat healthy? Yeah, absolutely. You make mistakes. Does that mean you quit? No. You learn, you pick up, and the next day you start again.
Yeah.
You know? I think some people live with this one day mentality, one day, you know, one day. Or you can see today as day one. You know, you either live with a one-day mentality or today's a day one mentality. Yeah. And I think that we need to live with more of a day one mentality. When you make a mistake, it's okay. Tomorrow's day one, you know? So get up, keep moving. I think that along the journey, there are going to be moments like, let's say, you know, you're dealing with sarcasm or you're dealing with how you manage money or, you know, whatever. You need to also give yourself the freedom to be imperfect. Yeah. No one outside of Jesus ever batted 1,000. Like, we all make mistakes along the way.
Yeah.
So give yourself grace, I think it was Drucker, but he took a lot of his research from someone else. I forget who it was, but his whole process of developing new habits was identify your cue, identify your response, and create a new reward.
Yeah.
And so, like, understanding what cues trigger you, understand how you respond to them. But one of the most important things that you can do is to give yourself permission to reward yourself when you do things right.
Celebrate.
Yeah, celebrate. Absolutely. Like, go, hey, if I hit the gym 5 days this week, day 6, I'm going to get a milkshake, or whatever.
Yeah.
And having those little, like, wins along the way is great. I think that you need to have moments like that. I think Dave Ramsey talks a lot about, like, when you save, you have moments where you save. And when you hit a certain amount of money that you've saved, like, you give yourself permission to go make a small purchase or to go buy that shirt you've been wanting or, whatever. But those sort of positive, affirmations are reserved to reward you for the discipline that you've put in. So building in the right reward system, understanding that it's not 0 to 100, that there are going to be setbacks along the way, framing the right expectations around the journey that you're going on really helps you enjoy the process that you're setting yourself up for.
Yeah, I love it, man. Such good thoughts. Josh, thanks for being with us today. And for those who are interested in connecting with Josh, you can hit him up on Instagram at Josh Jamison. There we go.
There was already another Josh Jamison.
There you go.
I know, it's tragic.
Yeah, it's crazy. What's weird, I think there's only one other dude in America named Tyler Sollie.
Wow.
Yeah.
I think in the, like, 80s, every 4th boy that was born was named Josh. like legitimately. So I had like 3 in every class growing up.
I love it.
Yeah.
So at Josh _Jamison, as well as at Eastridge Church, where you are a pastor. You and your wife, Carrie, are incredible. So thankful for you joining with me. And I'm serious. I think we need to do a conversation at some point. We'll have to think about it, but a theology on technology. I like that. Hey, if you have any questions about anything you've heard on today's podcast, make sure you send us an email at podcast@lifecenter.com. Don't forget to rate this podcast and leave a review on Apple Podcast or wherever you're listening from today. You can find me on Instagram at Tyler Sollie, although I'm rarely there, but I might stop by and post something. Thanks for listening to the Build Strong podcast, and we will see you next month.